Right now, at this very moment, your brain is performing an act of creation so profound that we rarely stop to notice it. Everything you're experiencing, my voice, your surroundings, even your sense of self, isn't what you think it is. But tonight, we're not exploring the mysteries of consciousness. Instead, we're venturing into something equally extraordinary, equally immediate, the reality that somewhere on Earth, at this exact moment, a fossil is being born, not over millions of years, not in some distant geological epoch, but today, this afternoon. Perhaps even as you listen to these words, everything you thought you knew about fossilization, that it's impossibly slow, that it requires eons of time, that it only happened in the ancient past, isn't quite what you think it is. Welcome to Sleep About Science. I'm your sleepy scientist, and tonight, wherever you are in the world, whether you're tucked into bed in Tokyo, settling down for the evening in London, or perhaps listening during your morning routine in Sydney, we're exploring the quietly astonishing reality of how fossils form in real time. And if you drift off to sleep while listening, that's perfectly wonderful. Your brain will continue processing this information even as you rest, weaving these stories of stone and time into your dreams like threads of silver through dark velvet. Before we begin this gentle journey through deep time made immediate, please make yourself as comfortable as possible. Pull your blankets a little closer, adjust your pillow to just the right angle. Let your body settle into whatever position feels most peaceful. Feel your shoulders dropping, your jaw unclenching, your breathing naturally slowing. And remember, this is educational content, not medical advice. If you haven't subscribed yet, you might want to there's something deeply comforting about knowing that tomorrow night, or the night after, another story of wonder will be waiting for you here, ready to carry you softly into sleep while filling your mind with the marvels of our universe. Now close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze soften, let your vision blur slightly as we begin this exploration together. Let's start with a question that might seem simple, but opens into depths we've only recently begun to understand. What exactly is a fossil? Most of us learned in school that fossils are the preserved remains of ancient life nasto, stones that once were bones, impressions left in rock by creatures that died millions of years ago. We pictured dinosaur skeletons in museums, trilobites curled in limestone, delicate fern fronds pressed between layers of shale, like flowers in an old book. And while this is true, it's only part of the story, like knowing only the final verse of an epic poem. The full truth is far more immediate, far more alive, far more present than we ever imagined. Picture this scene with me. It's a Tuesday afternoon in Yellowstone National Park. The sun hangs low in the western sky, casting everything in that golden light that photographers dream of. The hot springs bubble and steam in their eternal dance, just as they have for thousands of years, their waters a tapestry of impossible blues and greens and oranges. Tourists walk along the wooden boardwalks, cameras clicking, voices hushed by the otherworldly beauty of the place. But something remarkable is happening in those scalding waters, something that would have seemed impossible to paleontologists just decades ago, something so extraordinary that it rewrites our understanding of time itself. Bacteria, simple, single celled organisms that are among the most ancient forms of life on Earth, are being fossilized as they live. Not over millennia, not even over years or months, but in mere hours and days. Let me say that again. because it bears repeating, because it's so fundamentally astonishing. These organisms are crossing the threshold from life to fossil in real time, in the span of a human attention span, in the time it might take you to read a book or watch a movie. The process is breathtakingly elegant in its simplicity, like the most perfect haiku written not in words, but in chemistry and physics. These bacterial communities, called biofilms, create sticky living mats on the surfaces of the hot spring pools. Imagine them as underwater meadows, but meadows made not of grass and flowers, but of countless microscopic lives, each one breathing, eating, reproducing, dying, being replaced by its offspring in an endless cycle that has continued virtually unchanged for billions of years. As these bacterial communities grow and metabolize, as they go about their ancient business of turning sunlight and chemicals into life, they interact with the mineral rich water around them in ways that seem almost magical. The water in these springs is like liquid geology saturated with silica, the same compound that forms glass and quartz and sand. This silica doesn't remain dissolved forever. Under the right conditions, it begins to precipitate out of the water, forming tiny crystals that coat everything they touch. But here's where the magic happens, where chemistry becomes poetry. The silica doesn't simply coat the bacterial mats like paint on a canvas. Instead, it infiltrates them, penetrates them, embraces them at the molecular level. The bacteria don't die from this process, not immediately. They continue living, breathing, reproducing, all while being slowly, tenderly encased in stone, like insects in amber, but happening in real time, visible to the naked eye. Within days, not centuries, not millennia, but days you could count on your fingers, what were once purely biological organisms become something else entirely, living fossils. The bacterial cells remain alive within their mineral cocoons for weeks, sometimes months, like sleeping beauties waiting for a kiss that will never come. But they don't seem to suffer. They simply continue their ancient processes until gradually, gently, they surrender to stone. By the time the last cell finally stops its metabolic dance, the preservation process is complete. Every cell wall, every internal structure, every minute detail of their existence has been captured in stone with a precision that rivals the finest photography, the most detailed sculpture. Under powerful microscopes, scientists can see individual ribosomes, the tiny factories where proteins are made. They can identify specific enzymes, the molecular machines that power life. They can even, in some cases, detect traces of DNA, the code of life itself, locked forever in crystalline silence. This is fossilization in real time, and it's happening right now at this very moment in dozens of locations around the world. But Yellowstone is just the beginning of our story, just the opening chapter of a book that gets more remarkable with every page. Let's travel together in our minds to other places where time moves differently, where the boundary between life and stone blurs in ways that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations of scientists. Imagine you're standing on the shores of Shark Bay in Western Australia. The sun is warm on your face, not the harsh burning heat of the desert interior, but the gentle warmth of coastal morning light. The ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon, its surface broken by the occasional dolphin fin or the splash of a pelican diving for fish. The water here is incredibly clear, so transparent that you can see the bottom even far from shore, and what you see there is unlike anything else on Earth. Beneath the shallow, crystal clear water, something extraordinary is taking place, something that connects us directly to the very dawn of complex life on our planet. Here, in this remote corner of the world, ancient life forms called stromatolites are growing layer by layer, just as they have for over 3 billion years. These aren't exactly fossils in the traditional sense, but there's something perhaps even more remarkable. They're living geology, breathing stone, the marriage of biology and mineralogy made manifest. Stromatolites are built by cyanobacteria, some of the oldest life forms on Earth, older than trees, older than flowers, older than anything we would recognize as complex life. These microscopic architects work together in vast communities, like cities of bacteria, each individual organism playing its part in a construction project that dwarfs any human engineering achievement. They secrete sticky substances called extracellular polymeric substances. Imagine them as bacterial glue that traps sediment from the water around them. Day by day, season by season, year by year, century by century, they build upward, creating layered structures that look like underwater mountains made of stone, like frozen waves, like the Earth's streams made solid. Each layer tells a story of tides that came and went, of seasons that cycled from warm to cool, of chemical conditions that shifted like the moods of the ocean itself. But here's what's truly astonishing. What makes these structures more than just interesting geological formations. As each layer forms, the bacteria at the bottom become fossilized, while their descendants continue building above them. It's like a city where the foundations are made of the preserved remains of the city's founders, where the past literally supports the present, where death and life are not opposites, but partners in an ongoing dance of creation. You could visit Shark Bay today and tomorrow, and the day after, and each time the stromatolites would be imperceptibly larger. Each day brings new fossils into existence, new stories written in stone. The boundary between the living and the fossilized moves upward like a slow tide, carrying the record of life into the permanent archive of Earth's history. If you were patient enough, if you had the vision of geological time, you could actually watch fossils being born, could see the exact moment when biology becomes geology. These stromatolites in Shark Bay are among the few places on Earth where we can witness the same processes that created some of our planet's oldest fossils. 3 billion years ago, when the Earth was young and the atmosphere had almost no oxygen, when the continents were smaller and the oceans were different colors, stromatolites like these were everywhere, building the first great reefs, creating some of the first complex ecosystems, laying down the limestone that would become the foundation for so much of the life that followed. To stand beside these living fossils is to touch deep time directly, to place your hand on the unbroken thread that connects the present moment to the very beginning of complex life on Earth. The bacteria building these structures today are essentially identical to the ones that built the first stromatolites billions of years ago. They are living witnesses to the dawn of our planet's biography, and they are creating new chapters in that biography every single day. But let's shift our perspective now to something even more immediate, even more startling in its speed, even more directly visible to human perception. In caves around the world, limestone caves, lava tubes, gypsum caverns, in places where water drips steadily from mineral rich ceilings, Another kind of real time fossilization is occurring, but this time it's not ancient bacteria or primitive life forms that are being preserved. It's modern life, insects that might have been alive just yesterday, leaves that fell from trees just last autumn, small animals that wandered into these underground cathedrals and found themselves becoming part of the eternal architecture of stone. These caves are like natural laboratories, like workshops where the earth practices the art of preservation. The water that drips from above is saturated with calcium carbonate, the same mineral that forms limestone and marble, chalk and shells. This water has been on a journey through the rock above, dissolving minerals, becoming a liquid solution of future stone. When this mineral rich water encounters organic matter, a spider that has wandered too close to a steady drip, a leaf that has blown in from outside, a twig that has fallen from the ceiling, a small bat that has died in the darkness. Something magical begins to happen, something that transforms the temporary into the eternal with breathtaking efficiency. The calcium carbonate begins to precipitate out of the water, coating the organic material in a thin film of mineral. It's like nature's own version of electroplating, but instead of coating metal with metal, it's coating life with stone. Day by day, drop by drop, the coating grows thicker. The mineral film follows every contour, every surface, every tiny detail of the original organism. Within months, not years, not decades, but months you could mark on a calendar. What was once soft and vulnerable becomes hard and eternal. The organic material at the center might decay away, leaving behind a perfect hollow mold, or it might be gradually replaced, molecule by minerals, creating a perfect replica in stone. Scientists have found insects in these caves that were alive just a few years ago, now perfectly preserved in coats of crystalline calcium carbonate. Every detail of their anatomy remains visible, the facets of their compound eyes, each one a tiny lens that once focused light, the delicate veins in their wings, once highways for the fluid that powered flight, the tiny hairs on their legs, once sensors that detected the slightest vibration in the air. They have become fossils while barely having had time to decay, while their species are still thriving in the world above. In one cave in Romania, researchers discovered what they call a fossil graveyard. These weren't ancient creatures from the distant past. They were modern animals that had become trapped in the cave within the last few decades. Mice, bats, insects, spiders, all perfectly preserved by the cave's mineral rich environment, all transformed from biology to geology in the span of human memory. But perhaps most remarkable of all are the experiments that scientists have conducted intentionally, deliberately fossilizing modern organisms to understand how the process works, to decode the mystery of how life becomes stone. In laboratories around the world, researchers have learned to create fossils on demand, compressing millions of years of geological processes into weeks or even days, like time lapse photography applied to deep time itself. One of the most elegant of these experiments involves something as simple and beautiful as a flower. Scientists take a fresh rose, still blooming, still fragrant with life, its petals soft as silk and red as rubies. They place it in a solution of water and dissolved minerals, then use carefully controlled temperature and pressure to accelerate the fossilization process that would normally take eons. The transformation is both gradual and sudden, like watching a sunset or sunrise in slow motion. Within days, the organic molecules of the flower, the cellulose that gives structure to the petals, the chlorophyll that once captured sunlight, the complex proteins that regulated growth and reproduction, all of it begins to be replaced by minerals, the delicate petals, the thorny stem, the complex internal structures that once carried water and nutrients throughout the plant. All of it is gradually transformed from biology into geology while maintaining its essential form. The result is breathtaking, a perfect mineral replica of the original flower, preserved in stone with such exquisite detail that you can see the individual cells that once made up the petals. Under a powerful microscope, you can identify the stomata, the tiny pores through which the living flower once breathed. You can see the vascular bundles, the plant's equivalent of blood vessels, now rendered in crystal and mineral. It's no longer alive. It will never again turn its face toward the sun, never again release its perfume into the evening air, but it will endure for millions of years, a testament to beauty captured at the moment of its flowering. Future geologists, perhaps millions of years from now, will hold this stone flower in their hands and marvel at a moment of beauty from our time, preserved with perfect fidelity across unimaginable spans of time. These laboratory fossils teach us something profound about time itself, something that changes how we understand the relationship between the temporary and the eternal. They reveal that fossilization isn't really about vast spans of time, it's about the right conditions occurring at the right moment. Temperature, pressure, mineral content, pH levels, the absence of oxygen. When these factors align perfectly, when the chemistry is just right, the transformation from life to stone can happen with startling speed. Think about what this means. For over a century, paleontologists assumed that fossils were incredibly rare, that the processes of fossilization were so unlikely, so dependent on extraordinary circumstances, that we were seeing only the tiniest fraction of ancient life preserved in stone. The fossil record was thought to be like a book with most of its pages torn out, with only scattered fragments remaining to tell the story of life on Earth. But the discovery of real time fossilization suggests something radically different, that under the right conditions, fossilization might be far more common than we ever imagined. The fossil record might be less like a book with missing pages and more like a vast library with entire sections we simply haven't learned to read yet. This realization has revolutionized not just paleontology, but our understanding of the history of life itself. Consider what this means for our interpretation of every fossil we've ever found, every ancient creature preserved in stone, every delicate leaf pressed between layers of shale, every massive dinosaur skeleton mounted in museum halls. Each one represents not just a life that existed millions of years ago, but a moment, perhaps a very brief moment, when conditions were perfect for preservation. That trilobite in the museum, with its compound eyes, still visible after 500 million years, it represents a moment when that creature died in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, under exactly the right conditions for its body to become stone instead of returning to dust. That delicate fern frond, its every detail preserved in cold fit. It fell into water with the perfect chemistry, at the perfect temperature, with the perfect absence of decay causing bacteria. Each fossil is not just a relic of ancient life, but a celebration of an extraordinary moment when the universe aligned to preserve beauty, to capture a single note from life's symphony and make it eternal. The fossil record isn't just a chronicle of death, it's a monument to the moments when death became transcendence, when the temporary achieved permanence, when biology became art. But let's bring this story even closer to home, to places and processes you might encounter in your own life, in your own everyday experience. Have you ever noticed the white, chalky deposits that form around the edges of a leaky faucet? Or the mineral buildup inside an old tea kettle? Those crusty formations around the base of a fountain? These seemingly mundane phenomena are actually tiny examples of the same processes that create fossils, the same chemistry that transforms life into stone. When mineral rich water evaporates, it leaves behind its dissolved cargo of calcium, silica, magnesium, and dozens of other compounds. Given enough time and the right conditions, these deposits can preserve organic matter with remarkable fidelity. In your own garden, in the soil beneath your feet, microscopic fossilization processes are happening constantly, invisibly, silently. Bacteria die and are coated with minerals leaching from the soil. Plant cells are infiltrated by dissolved compounds that slowly replace their organic molecules with stone. Tiny insects become trapped in resin that will eventually harden into amber. The delicate shells of microscopic organisms settle to the bottom of puddles and ponds, where they may be rapidly buried and preserved. You walk through a world where life and stone are constantly exchanging places, where the boundary between the living and the geological is far more fluid than we typically imagine. Every step you take is on a surface where countless microscopic fossils are being born, where the great transformation from biology to geology continues its ancient dance, where the temporary and the eternal meet and merge in ways both subtle and profound. This brings us to one of the most beautiful aspects of real time fossilization, its fundamental democracy. The processes that preserve life in stone don't discriminate based on size or importance, or evolutionary significance, or beauty by human standards. A bacterium can become a fossil just as surely as a dinosaur. A single leaf can be preserved with the same geological fidelity as an entire forest. The dandelion growing in the crack in your sidewalk has the same potential for immortality as the mightiest oak tree. The universe of stone keeps records of the humble and the mighty with equal care, equal attention to detail, equal reverence for the miracle of existence. In the great democracy of fossilization, every life matters, every moment of existence has the potential to become eternal. Every breath and heartbeat and flutter of wings is equally deserving of preservation in the permanent archive of Earth's memory. In fact, some of the most remarkable real time fossils are also the most humble, the most easily overlooked. In sediment cores taken from lake bottoms around the world, scientists have found perfect microscopic fossils of diatoms, single celled algae that exist in almost every body of water on Earth. These tiny organisms, invisible to the naked eye, smaller than the period at the end of this sentence, have been preserved with such extraordinary detail that researchers can identify not just their species, but individual variations within species. Their delicate glassy shells, intricate as snowflakes and just as unique, have become permanent records of recent life. Some of these diatom fossils are from organisms that died just decades ago within human memory, but they are already becoming part of the geological record, already joining the vast library of life written in stone. Under powerful microscopes, these microscopic fossils reveal details that take your breath away. You can see the tiny pores through which they once exchanged gases with the water around them. You can identify the internal structures that once housed their chloroplasts, the green organelles that captured sunlight and turned it into sugar. You can even see evidence of their last meal, microscopic particles of food still visible within their preserved cells. These humble organisms remind us that fossilization is not just about the spectacular, the enormous, the obviously impressive. It's about the entire web of life, from the tiniest bacteria to the largest mammals, from the briefest mayfly to the longest lived tree. Every thread in life's tapestry has the potential to be preserved, to become part of the permanent record, to achieve a kind of immortality through stone. But perhaps the most moving examples of real time fossilization are those that capture not just individual organisms, but entire moments in the history of life, entire ecosystems frozen at a single point in time. In the waters around volcanic islands, where hot springs meet the ocean, where the chemistry of the water is perfect for rapid mineralization, scientists have discovered what they call fossil nurseries, places where baby corals, newly settled polyps, just beginning their lives, are being fossilized even as they grow. Picture this extraordinary scene: a tiny coral larva, no bigger than the head of a pin, drifts through the warm ocean water for days or weeks, carried by currents, searching for the perfect place to begin its life. It's looking for hard substrate, the right water chemistry, the right depth, the right amount of sunlight filtering down from above. When it finds this perfect spot, it settles down, attaches itself to the rock, and begins one of the most remarkable transformations in the natural world. The larva metamorphoses into a polyp, a tiny animal that looks like a miniature sea anemone. It begins to secrete calcium carbonate, building around itself a hard skeleton that will become its home and protection. This is the beginning of what might, over centuries or millennia, become part of a vast reef ecosystem, one of the most biodiverse habitats on Earth. But in these special nurseries, these places where the water is supersaturated with minerals, the process doesn't wait centuries to begin preservation. The mineral rich water doesn't wait for the coral to grow large and mature before beginning the fossilization process. It starts immediately, from the very first moment of settlement, coating the baby coral in additional minerals, creating a fossil record of its earliest moments of life. These fossil nurseries give us something unprecedented in the history of paleontology: a real time view of how life begins, how ecosystems establish themselves, how the future history of Earth starts to take shape. They show us that fossilization isn't just about death, and preservation is about capturing life at its most vulnerable, most hopeful moments, at the very instant when potential becomes reality. Imagine what future paleontologists will make of these nurseries millions of years from now, when our current coral reefs are either thriving in ways we can't imagine or are just memories preserved in stone. Scientists will study these fossils and see not just what ancient corals looked like, but how they began their lives, how they took their first tentative steps toward building the reefs that may have defined entire geological eras. As we explore these wonders, it's worth pausing to consider what they tell us about our own place in the story of life on Earth, our own relationship to the processes that turn the temporary into the eternal. Right now, as you listen to these words, as you breathe quietly in whatever comfortable space you've chosen for tonight's journey, you are surrounded by the raw materials of future fossils. The calcium in your bones, calcium, that may have once been part of an ancient seashell or a coral reef, or the skeleton of a creature that lived millions of years ago, meal eventually returned to the earth, and some of it, under the right circumstances, might become part of the geological record. The carbon in your cells, carbon that may have once been part of a dinosaur or a primordial forest or the atmosphere of the early earth, will continue its journey through the carbon cycle, and some of it might end up preserved in future fossils. This isn't meant to be morbid or frightening, Thessalony. Quite the opposite. It's meant to be comforting, even beautiful, a reminder of the deep connections that bind all life together across time. You are made of ancient stardust, elements forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. You are composed of materials that have been part of countless other living things throughout Earth's history. The atoms that make up your body have been part of rocks and trees and ocean water and bacteria and fish and flowers and other human beings. And someday, in the fullness of time, they will be again. You are not separate from the great cycles of Earth, you are part of them, a temporary arrangement of eternal materials, a brief but beautiful song sung by elements that have been singing different songs for billions of years. But more than that, you exist at a moment in Earth's history when fossilization is happening all around you, when the processes that preserve life in stone are active and ongoing and visible. You are not just made of materials that might someday become fossils. We are living in a world where fossilization is occurring in real time, where the boundary between life and stone is being crossed every day, where the temporary and the eternal are in constant conversation. You breathe the same water vapor that carries minerals into caves where modern fossils are forming. You walk on ground where bacterial communities are being preserved as we speak. You exist in an atmosphere where the carbon dioxide you exhale might, under the right circumstances, become incorporated into mineral deposits that will endure for millions of years. This perspective can change how we see even the most ordinary moments of our lives. That walk you took through the park last weekend. You were moving through an environment where fossilization processes were active in the soil, in the pond water, in the very air around you. That houseplant on your windowsill, it's breathing out carbon dioxide that might, under the right circumstances, become part of limestone forming on the ocean floor. The coffee you had this morning was made with water that contained dissolved minerals that are at this very moment helping to create new fossils somewhere in the world. We are all participants in the grand process by which life becomes stone, by which temporary biological phenomena become permanent geological features. We are all part of the story that Earth tells about itself through its fossils. We are all contributors to the great library of life preserved in stone. But let's return for a moment to the purely scientific wonder of real time fossilization, because there are aspects of this phenomenon that border on the magical, that push the boundaries of what we thought was possible in terms of preservation. Scientists have discovered that some fossilization processes can preserve not just the physical structure of organisms, but also their chemical signatures, their molecular fingerprints, even traces of their genetic information. In those Yellowstone hot springs we visited earlier, researchers have found that the rapid fossilization process can preserve the actual DNA of bacteria locked within their mineral tombs like genetic time capsules. This DNA can remain stable for months, sometimes even years, providing scientists with genetic information about microorganisms that are technically fossils that have crossed the threshold from life to stone, but still retain the code that once directed their existence. Think about the implications of this. We can read the genetic code of beings that are simultaneously alive and turned to stone, organisms that exist in a liminal state between biology and geology. We can sequence the DNA of fossils that were created within human memory, compare it to the DNA of their living relatives, and understand exactly how the fossilization process affects genetic material. Even more remarkable are discoveries of what scientists call cellular fossils, preserved cells so perfectly mineralized that individual organelles, the tiny structures within cells, remain visible under powerful microscopes. These fossils capture life at its most fundamental level, showing us not just what ancient organisms looked like from the outside, but how they worked on the inside, how their internal machinery functioned. In some cases, the preservation is so complete that scientists can identify individual proteins, the molecular machines that carry out the actual work of life. These protein fossils, formed in real time under modern conditions, give us unprecedented insight into how life persists across the boundary between biology and geology, how the essential information of existence can survive the transformation from living tissue to stone. This level of preservation was once thought to be completely impossible. The molecules that make up living things, DNA, proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, were assumed to be too fragile, too chemically unstable, too temporary to survive the transformation into stone. They were thought to decay long before fossilization could occur, leaving behind only the gross physical structure of organisms, the shape without the substance. But real time fossilization has shown us that under the right conditions, life can transition into stone while losing almost nothing of its essential character, while retaining the very molecules that once made it alive. The boundary between living and fossil becomes not a wall, but a permeable membrane, a gentle transformation rather than an abrupt ending. These discoveries have profound implications for how we search for life elsewhere in the universe, how we imagine the possibility of finding evidence of biology on other worlds. If organisms can be fossilized so rapidly and completely here on Earth, preserving not just their shape, but their very molecular essence, then other planets with the right conditions might also be preserving detailed records of their biological history. Mars, with its ancient hot springs and mineral rich waters, with its history of volcanic activity and hydrothermal processes, might contain real time fossils of its own, created during the brief period when life on that planet might have been active. The icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, with their subsurface oceans and hydrothermal vents, might be creating fossils even now, preserving evidence of whatever life might exist in their hidden seas. But we don't need to look to other planets to find wonder, to encounter the miraculous. Right here on Earth, the processes of real time fossilization are creating new mysteries faster than we can solve them, opening new questions faster than we can answer them, revealing new aspects of the relationship between life and stone that continue to astonish scientists. In the deep ocean, around hydrothermal vents, where superheated water rich in minerals erupts from the seafloor like underwater geysers, researchers have found evidence of fossilization processes that happen not in days or weeks, but in hours. The chemistry around these vents is so extreme, so rich in dissolved minerals, so unlike anything most life on Earth has ever encountered, that it creates conditions for preservation that are almost unimaginably rapid. The creatures that live around these vents tube worms that look like underwater flowers, bacteria that thrive in water hot enough to kill most life on Earth, crustaceans that have never seen sunlight, exist in an environment where fossilization can begin almost immediately after death. The mineral rich water that sustains their unusual metabolism also serves as their eventual preservation medium, like living in a world made of liquid amber. Scientists have observed tube worms, those elegant creatures that can grow to be several feet long and live for decades in the scalding water around volcanic vents, being coated with minerals even while they're still alive. Their calcium carbonate tubes, which they secrete as homes and protection, begin to accumulate additional mineral layers from the surrounding water almost as soon as they're formed. Layer by layer, drop by drop of mineral rich water, what starts as a biological structure becomes increasingly geological. The boundary between the living tube worm and its fossilized home becomes blurred until it's difficult to say where biology ends and geology begins. The creature lives within its own forming fossil, like an artist working on a sculpture that will eventually become their monument. These deep sea environments give us a glimpse of what Earth might have been like billions of years ago, when life was young and strange, when the chemistry of the oceans was very different from today, when the processes that would eventually create the fossil record we know were first being established. The real time fossilization happening around hydrothermal vents might be similar to processes that preserved the earliest life on Earth, creating the ancient fossils that tell us how life began and evolved. But perhaps most remarkable of all is what these discoveries tell us about time itself, about the relationship between the fast time of biology and the slow time of geology. We usually think of geological time and biological time as completely separate realms, one vast and slow, measured in millions and billions of years, the other brief and quick, measured in seconds and minutes and hours and days. Geological processes are supposed to take eons mountain building, erosion, the formation of sedimentary layers, the slow dance of continents across the Earth's surface. Biological processes are supposed to happen quickly: heartbeats, breathing, growth, reproduction, death. These two temporal worlds seem to exist in parallel but separate universes with little overlap or interaction. But real time fossilization shows us that these two temporal worlds can overlap, can interact, can become one. In the space of a human heartbeat, a bacterium can begin its transformation from life to stone. In the time it takes to read this sentence, somewhere in a hot spring or a mineral rich cave, an organism crosses the threshold from biology to geology, the great wheel of geological time, which we imagine as turning so slowly as to be almost motionless, actually has moments where it spins with biological speed. This realization changes how we understand our place in the history of Earth, our relationship to the vast spans of time that have shaped our planet. We are not just temporary biological phenomena existing in the brief gap between geological epochs. We are active participants in geological processes that are happening right now at the speed of life itself. Our moment in Earth's history is not separate from the great story told by fossils. It is part of that story, being written in stone even as we live it. The breath you're taking right now, the thoughts flowing through your mind, the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat. All of this is happening during a time when fossils are being created, when life is becoming stone, when the temporary is achieving permanence. And this brings us to a beautiful paradox that lies at the heart of real time fossilization. The faster we discover that life can become stone, the more precious each moment of existence becomes. Knowing that fossilization can happen in hours or days doesn't diminish the miracle of being alive. It amplifies it, intensifies it, makes it more remarkable, not less. It shows us that the transformation from biology to geology, from temporary to eternal, is happening constantly all around us, making each moment of animate existence more extraordinary than we ever imagined. Every breath you take, every beat of your heart, every thought that passes through your consciousness happens against the backdrop of a world where life regularly becomes immortal, where the boundary between the temporary and the eternal is crossed thousands of times each day. Right now, as you listen to these words, as your body rests comfortably wherever you've chosen to spend this evening, as your mind wanders through the landscapes of wonder we've explored together, you are part of a world where life and stone are constantly exchanging places. The air you breathe contains molecules that will eventually become part of sedimentary rocks. The water you drink carries minerals that might, under the right circumstances, help preserve some future form of life in stone. You are not just a biological being existing temporarily on a geological planet. You are a participant in the ongoing conversation between life and stone, between the temporary and the eternal, between the brief spark of consciousness and the enduring memory of rock and mineral. You are part of a story that began billions of years ago and will continue billions of years into the future. This conversation between life and stone has been going on since the very beginning of life on Earth, and it will continue for billions more years, long after our sun has become a red giant and the Earth as we know it has changed beyond recognition. But your particular contribution to it is happening right now in this moment, as you exist in a world where fossilization occurs not just in the distant past or the far future, but in the eternal present. Let's explore this idea further, because there's something deeply philosophical, almost spiritual, about the reality of real time fossilization. It suggests that the universe has a memory, that existence leaves traces, that nothing that has ever lived is ever truly lost. Every organism that has ever existed, from the smallest virus to the largest whale, from the briefest bacterial bloom to the most ancient tree, has the potential to become part of the permanent record, part of the story that planets tell about themselves. Consider the morning spider that builds its web in your garden each day. You might watch it for weeks, seeing it catch flies, repair its web after rain, move with that peculiar spider precision that seems almost like a dance. To you, it's a temporary visitor, a small life that will soon be replaced by others of its kind. But somewhere in the world, under the right conditions, another spider, just like it is becoming a fossil, is crossing the threshold from temporary life to permanent stone. That spider's delicate legs, each one a masterpiece of biological engineering, are being preserved in mineral with such precision that future scientists will be able to study not just its anatomy, but its behavior. The position of its legs might tell them how it died. The contents of its stomach, if preserved, might reveal what it had been eating. The silk proteins in its web making organs might provide insight into how these remarkable materials evolved. This is the democracy of fossilization made manifest, the idea that every life, no matter how small or brief, has the potential for immortality through stone. The spider in your garden and the spider becoming fossilized in some distant cave are essentially the same creature, separated only by the accident of location and chemistry. One will return to dust within weeks, the other will endure for millions of years, but both are equally real, equally important, equally worthy of preservation. In the Amazon rainforest, where the diversity of life reaches almost incomprehensible levels, scientists have discovered fossilization processes occurring in the mineral rich waters of certain streams and rivers. The water here, flowing over ancient rocks and through soils rich in dissolved minerals, creates microenvironments where rapid preservation can occur. Leaves that fall into these streams, carried by the countless rains that feed the forest, sometimes land in pools where the chemistry is just right for fossilization. Within months, their delicate structures, the network of veins that once carried nutrients, the microscopic pores that once exchanged gases with the atmosphere, even the cellular structures that once captured and processed sunlight, all of it can be preserved in stone. Future paleontologists studying these fossils will see not just evidence of ancient plant life, but a detailed record of one of the most biodiverse ecosystems that ever existed on Earth. They will be able to study the exact structure of leaves from trees that may no longer exist, to understand how these plants process sunlight and water, to see the precise adaptations that allowed them to thrive in one of Earth's most complex environments. But the Amazon gives us more than just plant fossils. In the muddy sediments of certain riverbanks, where seasonal flooding creates perfect conditions for rapid burial and mineralization, scientists have found evidence of insect fossils forming in real time. The sheer abundance of life in the rainforest means that countless insects die every day, and some of them, by pure chance, die in exactly the right place for preservation. These insect fossils capture not just individual species, but entire ecological moments. A fossilized beetle might still contain pollen grains in its digestive system, telling us exactly which flowers it visited before its death. A preserved butterfly wing might show us the precise pattern of scales that once reflected sunlight in ways that helped it find mates or avoid predators. Each of these fossils is like a snapshot, a single frame from the vast movie of life in the rainforest. And they're being created now, today, as you listen to these words, as the rain falls and the rivers flow, and life continues its endless dance of birth and death and transformation. Moving from the tropics to the Arctic, we find yet another theater where real time fossilization performs its quiet miracles. In the permanently frozen soils of the tundra, in permafrost that has remained solid for thousands of years, organic matter is preserved with a fidelity that rivals any geological process. But now, as climate change begins to thaw some of these frozen archives, scientists are discovering that new fossilization processes are beginning. When permafrost thaws, it releases organic matter that has been frozen for millennia. Plants, animals, even microorganisms that have been in a state of suspended animation since the last ice age. But in some locations, where the thaw water is rich in minerals, where the chemistry is just right, this ancient organic matter doesn't simply decay. Instead, it becomes fossilized, transformed from temporarily preserved biological material into permanently preserved stone. It's as if the earth is taking advantage of climate change to create new archives, new ways of preserving the record of life. The disruption of one preservation system, freezing in, becomes the catalyst for another mineralization. What was once ice preserved becomes stone preserved, trading one form of immortality for another. But perhaps nowhere is the reality of real time fossilization more personally relevant than in our own human environments, in the places where we live and work and play. Urban environments, it turns out, can create their own unique fossilization processes, their own ways of preserving life in stone. In city fountains and ornamental pools, where water is treated with various chemicals and minerals, scientists have observed rapid mineralization of organic matter, leaves that fall into these artificial water features, insects that land on the surface, even small animals that might drink from these pools. Null can become fossilized under the right conditions. The concrete and steel of our cities, the chemicals we use to treat our water, the very infrastructure of modern life, all of this creates new chemical environments, new possibilities for preservation. We are inadvertently creating the conditions for future fossils, for evidence of our time and our impact on the planet. In storm drains and sewers, where water rich in dissolved materials flows constantly, scientists have found examples of rapid mineralization. The urban environment, with its complex chemistry and its constant flow of mineral rich water, becomes an unexpected laboratory for fossilization processes. Future archaeologists studying our time might find fossils of urban pigeons preserved in storm drain deposits, their bones infiltrated with minerals leached from concrete and asphalt. They might discover fossilized insects preserved in the calcium carbonate deposits that form in municipal water systems. They might uncover evidence of the plants we grew in our gardens, preserved in the mineral rich runoff from our streets and sidewalks. These urban fossils will tell a unique story about life in the Anthropocene, about how organisms adapted to human modified environments, about the kinds of life that thrived in the chemical landscapes we created. They will be evidence not just of what lived during our time, but of how our activities changed the very processes by which life becomes stone. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of real time fossilization, the realization that we are not just observers of the fossil record, but active participants in its creation. Every choice we make, every chemical we release into the environment, every modification we make to natural systems, all of this affects the conditions under which future fossils will form. We are inadvertently curating the fossil record of the future, determining which aspects of current life will be preserved and which will be lost. The chemicals we use in agriculture might affect how plant fossils form. The plastics we produce might create new types of preservation environments. The carbon dioxide we release into the atmosphere might change the chemistry of oceans and lakes in ways that affect fossilization processes. This is both a tremendous responsibility and an extraordinary opportunity. We have the chance to be conscious participants in the creation of Earth's geological memory, to think deliberately about what evidence of our time we want to leave for future scientists to discover. But beyond these large scale considerations, there's something deeply personal about the reality of real time fossilization. It means that the natural world you experience every day, the trees in your neighborhood, the birds at your feeder, the flowers in your garden, exists in a context where life regularly becomes eternal, where the temporary achievement's permanence, where the brief spark of existence can become an enduring part of Earth's memory. That robin you see outside your window each morning might have relatives becoming fossilized in mineral rich pools hundreds of miles away. The oak tree you sit under on summer afternoons belongs to a species that is being preserved in real time in locations around the world. The very air you breathe carries molecules that might, under the right circumstances, become incorporated into future fossils. You live in a world where miracles are commonplace, where the impossible happens every day, where the boundary between life and eternity is crossed thousands of times each hour. This doesn't diminish the preciousness of life. It reveals that preciousness, shows us that every moment of existence is so valuable that the universe has developed countless ways to preserve it. As we continue our gentle journey through the science of real time fossilization, let's visit one more extraordinary location where these processes unfold, the salt lakes of the world, places where the chemistry of preservation reaches almost surreal extremes. In these harsh, beautiful environments, where the concentration of dissolved minerals can be 10 times higher than in normal seawater, fossilization can occur with breathtaking speed. Lake Natron in Tanzania, Lake Mono in California, the Dead Sea in the Middle East. These places seem almost alien, their waters so mineral rich that they can preserve organic matter within days of death. The high salt content creates conditions that are simultaneously hostile to life and perfect for preservation, environments where death and immortality walk hand in hand. Animals that die in these waters, birds that miscalculate their landing, fish from connected freshwater streams, insects blown in by desert winds, can become coated with salt crystals so quickly that their bodies are preserved with extraordinary detail. The salt acts like nature's own embalming fluid, drawing moisture from tissues while simultaneously coating them with preserving minerals. But these salt lakes give us more than just individual fossils. They preserve entire ecological moments, whole communities of life frozen in mineral time. In Lake Mono, scientists have found preserved brine shrimp, tiny crustaceans that form the base of the lake's food web, fossilized in positions that show them in the very act of feeding, mating, swimming. These fossils capture not just what these organisms looked like, but how they behaved, how they interacted with each other and their environment. They are like three-dimensional movies carved in stone, showing us the daily drama of life in one of Earth's most extreme environments. The speed of preservation in these environments is so rapid that scientists have been able to observe it in real time, watching as organisms cross the threshold from life to fossil within their own observation period. It's like having a window into deep time, a way to see the processes that created the ancient fossil record happening before our eyes. This observational capacity has revolutionized our understanding of fossilization itself. For the first time in the history of paleontology, scientists can watch fossils being born, can see exactly how the transformation from biology to geology unfolds, can test their theories about ancient preservation by watching modern preservation happen. It's as if we've gained the ability to read the universe's diary as it's being written, to see the rough draft of geological history being composed in real time. This has led to discoveries that have challenged fundamental assumptions about how fossils form, how complete the fossil record might be, and what kinds of information can be preserved across geological time. For instance, Scientists once assumed that soft tissues, skin, muscles, internal organs could never be fossilized, that only hard parts like bones and shells could survive the transformation to stone. But observations of real time fossilization have shown that under the right conditions, even the most delicate soft tissues can be preserved with remarkable fidelity. In the Burgess Shale of Canada, one of the most famous fossil deposits in the world, scientists have found 500 million year old fossils that preserve not just the hard shells of ancient creatures, but their muscles, their digestive systems, even their nervous systems. For decades, paleontologists wondered how such extraordinary preservation was possible. But studies of modern fossilization processes have given us the answer. Rapid burial in fine sediment, combined with specific chemical conditions that prevent decay, can preserve soft tissues just as effectively as hard ones. The key is speed. The faster the preservation process, the more detail can be captured before decay destroys the delicate structures. This understanding has led to a renaissance in paleontology, a new appreciation for the potential completeness of the fossil record. Deposits that were once dismissed as containing only fragmentary remains are being re examined with new techniques, revealing details that were always there but never recognized. Scientists are finding preserved blood vessels in dinosaur bones, identifying fossilized melanosomes, the structures that create color in ancient bird feathers, discovering preserved proteins in fossils millions of years old. The line between impossible and possible in paleontology has been redrawn, expanded, made far more inclusive than anyone ever imagined. But let's step back from the technical details and consider the emotional, almost spiritual impact of these discoveries. What does it mean to live in a world where real time fossilization is occurring? What does it do to our sense of time, of permanence, of our own place in the great story of life on Earth? For one thing, it collapses the distance between past and present, between ancient and modern, between the geological time of rocks and the biographical time of our own lives. When you hold a fossil in your hands, whether it's a trilobite from the Paleozoic or a leaf fossilized just last year, you're touching the same processes, witnessing the same transformation, participating in the same conversation between life and stone. The trilobite and the modern leaf are separated by hundreds of millions of years, but they're connected by the identical chemistry of preservation, the same fundamental processes that turn biology into geology. In a very real sense, they're contemporaries, fellow travelers on the same journey from temporary existence to permanent memory. This perspective can be deeply comforting. It suggests that existence leaves traces, that nothing that has ever lived is ever completely lost, that the universe has a way of preserving beauty and complexity in the simple fact of having been alive. Every creature that has ever existed, from the smallest bacteria to the largest dinosaur, from the briefest mayfly to the most ancient tree, has the potential to become part of the permanent record. You too are part of this process. The calcium in your bones, the carbon in your cells, the very atoms that make up your body. The tolls of this will eventually return to the Earth's great recycling system. Some of it might become part of future rocks, future fossils, future evidence of the time when life flourished on a small planet orbiting a medium sized star in an ordinary galaxy. But more immediately, you exist at a moment when fossilization is happening all around you, When the processes that create the geological memory of life are active and ongoing, you breathe air that carries molecules into environments where fossils are forming. You drink water that contains the same minerals that are at this very moment, helping to preserve life in stone somewhere in the world. This doesn't mean you need to think about fossilization constantly or worry about your own geological legacy. Rather, it's an invitation to see the ordinary world around you as extraordinary, to recognize that you live in a universe where the temporary regularly achieves permanence, where life's brief sparks are constantly being transformed into enduring flames. The tree outside your window, the bird at your feeder, the flowers in your garden, all of these exist in a context where some of their relatives, somewhere in the world, are becoming fossils, the processes that will preserve evidence of our time for future geologists to study are happening now, today, as you go about your ordinary life. This realization can change how we see conservation, how we think about protecting the natural world. We're not just preserving life for its own sake, or for our own enjoyment, or even for future generations of humans to experience. We're also curating the fossil record of the future, determining what evidence of our time's biodiversity will be available for study millions of years from now. Every species we save, every ecosystem we protect, every effort we make to maintain the complexity and beauty of life on Earth. All of this affects what future paleontologists will find when they study the rocks that are forming today. We have the opportunity to ensure that the fossil record of our time tells a story of abundance rather than extinction, of diversity rather than impoverishment. But even beyond these conservation implications, the reality of real time fossilization offers us a new way to think about time itself, about the relationship between the momentary and the eternal. It shows us that these aren't opposite concepts, but complementary ones, that the brief and the enduring are partners in the same cosmic dance. Every moment of your life exists against the backdrop of this dance, this ongoing conversation between life and stone. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought that passes through your consciousness happens in a universe where biology regularly becomes geology, where the temporary achieves permanence, where the spark of existence leaves lasting traces in the memory of planets. As we begin to approach the end of our journey together tonight, let's consider one final aspect of real time fossilization that brings everything full circle, the way these processes connect us, not just to the past, but to the future. The fossils being created today will be discovered by scientists in the distant future, perhaps by beings so different from us that we can barely imagine them. These future paleontologists will hold in their hands, or whatever appendages they might have, stones that were once alive during our time. They will study the molecular structure of organisms that lived when you lived, that breathed the same air, that saw the same sun and moon and stars that you see tonight. Through the miracle of fossilization, your moment in time will speak to their moment in time across unimaginable spans of years. The life that surrounds you today, the trees and birds and flowers and insects, the vast web of existence that you are part of, some of it is being preserved right now for their study and wonder. In a very real sense, real time fossilization makes us participants in a conversation that spans not just millions of years of the past, but millions of years of the future. We are both students of ancient life, learning from fossils that formed long before we existed, and teachers of future life, creating fossils that will be studied long after we are gone. This is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of all, the way fossilization weaves past, present, and future into a single continuous story. The trilobite fossil you might see in a museum speaks across 500 million years to tell you about life in ancient seas. The coral polyp, being fossilized today in a mineral rich tide pool, will speak across future millions of years to tell beings we cannot imagine about life in our seas. You exist at the pivot point of this great conversation, at the moment where ancient stories are still being told and future stories are just beginning to be written. Every day you live, every natural place you visit, every moment you spend in wonder at the complexity and beauty of life tour, all of this is part of both the ending of one chapter in Earth's story and the beginning of the next. As you prepare for sleep tonight, consider carrying this perspective into your dreams, that you live in a world where life regularly becomes eternal, where the temporary achieves permanence, where the brief spark of existence leaves lasting traces in the memory of stones. You are part of a story that began billions of years ago, with the first life to leave its mark in rock, and you are part of a story that will continue billions of years into the future, carried forward by the fossils being created today. The processes we've explored together, the rapid fossilization in hot springs and caves, the ongoing preservation in salt lakes and coral reefs, the daily miracle of biology becoming geology, all of these are happening right now in the quiet darkness of this very night. Somewhere in the world, as you listen to these words, a fossil is being born. Life is becoming stone. The temporary is achieving eternity. Sleep well, knowing that you exist in a universe where such miracles are commonplace, where the impossible happens every day, where the boundary between life and forever is crossed thousands of times each hour. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that you are part of a world where fossils are born every day, where stories written in stone are being composed in real time, where the great conversation between life and time continues its eternal dance. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the quietly astonishing world of real time fossilization. If you're still awake and listening from wherever you are in the world, whether it's late night in New York, early morning in Tokyo, or afternoon somewhere in between, I'm deeply curious about your experience. Are you in a place where some of these fossilization processes might be happening nearby? Have you ever found a fossil or visited a place where ancient life is preserved in stone? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share a story about a fossil you've discovered, or a place where you've encountered deep time, or simply tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. There's something magical about knowing that this exploration of how life becomes eternal is being heard by people all around our beautiful fossil creating planet. And if this gentle journey through science has brought you any measure of peace or wonder, if it has helped you see the ordinary world around you as extraordinary, please consider subscribing to Sleep About Science. Tomorrow night, or the next, another story of discovery will be waiting for you here, ready to carry you softly into sleep while filling your mind with the marvels of our universe. There will always be another mystery to explore, another aspect of the natural world to marvel at, another way that science reveals the universe to be more beautiful and astonishing than we ever imagined. The great story of discovery never ends. It just unfolds, chapter by chapter, revelation by revelation, like the slow formation of fossils themselves. Until we meet again in this quiet corner of the internet, where science and sleep converge. May you rest well. May your dreams be filled with the slow, beautiful dance of life becoming stone, of moments becoming eternal, of the temporary world we inhabit, revealing its deep connections to the timeless story written in rock and mineral and preserved forever in the patient archives of Earth itself. May you sleep peacefully, knowing that you are part of a universe where miracles happen, not just in the distant past or the far future, but right now in the gentle transition from wakefulness into dreams. Good night, wherever you are in the world, and sweet dreams filled with the wonder of real time fossilization, where life becomes eternal and stories become stone.